21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. Introduction. Imagine for a moment that it's the year 1938. The world is standing on the edge of a cliff. Three grand stories are being offered to humanity, each one promising a path to the future. There's the fascist story, which speaks of national glory and iron will. There's the communist story, which dreams of a worker's paradise and a global revolution. And then there's the liberal story, which champions freedom, democracy, and the rights of the individual. Fast forward 30 years to 1968. The fascist story has been shattered by a world war. Now, only two stories remain, locked in a tense global battle: communism versus liberalism. Fast forward again, this time to 1998. The Berlin Wall has fallen. The Soviet Union is gone. The communist story has collapsed. For a moment, it seems like there's only one story left: the liberal story. It looks like the undisputed champion, the final, inevitable guide for all of humanity. Democracy, free markets, and human rights were supposed to conquer the entire world. It was called, by some, the end of history. Now, look around you. It's today. And in 2018, when this book was written, we were down to zero. The one story that seemed to have all the answers is now in crisis. People are losing faith. The world feels confusing, chaotic, and unpredictable. This is the world that historian and philosopher Yuval Noah Harari invites us to confront in his monumental work, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Following his best-selling explorations of our past in Sapiens and our future in Homo Deus, Harari turns his sharp, unflinching gaze to the here and now. He asks the most urgent questions of our time. What is happening in the world today? What are the deepest meanings of these events? And what should we do about them? This isn't just another book. It has sold millions of copies worldwide, translated into dozens of languages, because it acts as a compass for a world that has lost its map. Harari, a professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, has a unique gift for seeing the big picture, for connecting the dots between technology, politics, and our own inner lives. In the next hour, we're going to journey through the core lessons of this incredible book. My promise to you is this: by the end of our time together, you won't have all the answers, because Harari argues that no one does, but you will have a much clearer understanding of the questions. You will gain a powerful new lens through which to see the world, to understand the forces that are shaping your life, and to begin preparing for a future that will be unlike anything humanity has ever known. This isn't just about knowledge, it's about gaining clarity in a world flooded with noise. And as Harari tells us in his opening lines, in a world deluged by irrelevant information, clarity is power. So, let's begin. Book summary. I want you to think about the story you've been told your whole life. It's a story of progress. The story that if you work hard, get an education, and participate in society, you'll have a job, you'll have a voice, and you'll have a meaningful role to play in the world. This is the liberal story, the one that triumphed in the 20th century. It celebrated liberty, the freedom of individuals, the freedom of markets, and the freedom of ideas. For decades, it seemed like an unstoppable force, a promise of peace and prosperity for all. But as Yuval Noah Harari points out, since the global financial crisis of 2008, and with events like Brexit and the rise of Donald Trump, people all over the world have become increasingly disillusioned. The grand story that held everything together is starting to unravel. And this is happening at the precise moment when humanity is facing its biggest challenges ever. We're standing at the confluence of two immense revolutions. On one hand, the revolution in information technology. On the other, the revolution in biotechnology, biotech. Harari argues that the merger of these two fields will change the very meaning of being human. And it will challenge the two core values of the liberal story: liberty and equality. Let's start with a question that's probably on your mind. What kind of job will you have when you grow up? For generations, the answer was relatively stable. But today, we have no idea what the job market will look like in 2050. It's generally agreed that artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics will change almost every line of work. You might have heard this before. You might have heard that automation has been happening for centuries, and for every job lost to a machine, a new one was created. When tractors replaced farmhands, those people went to work in factories. When robots replaced factory workers, they became cashiers or customer service agents. So why is this time different? Harari explains that humans have two types of abilities, physical and cognitive. In the past, machines competed with us mainly in physical abilities. Humans always had a massive edge in cognition, in learning, analyzing, communicating, and especially in understanding human emotions. But AI is now beginning to outperform humans in more and more of these cognitive skills, including understanding emotions. Think about it. We used to believe that intuition was some mysterious, magical quality. A good doctor has an intuition about a diagnosis. A good banker has an intuition about a loan. A good driver has an intuition about the pedestrian about to step into the road. But what is intuition, really? Harari, drawing on the latest neuroscience, explains that human intuition is in reality pattern recognition. Our brains are like incredibly complex algorithms, built by millions of years of evolution, that calculate probabilities in a split second. A good driver's brain isn't using magic, it's recognizing recurring patterns from thousands of hours on the road to predict what a careless pedestrian might do. A good banker is recognizing patterns in financial data and human behavior to spot a risky borrower. The problem is, the biochemical algorithms in our brains are far from perfect. They rely on shortcuts and are adapted for life on the African savanna, not the urban jungle. This is why AI can outperform us even in tasks that seem to require intuition. If AI just needs to compete against our neural networks in calculating probabilities and recognizing patterns, that's not an impossible task. In fact, it's a task where AI has some incredible, non-human advantages. Harari points out two of them: connectivity and updatability. Humans are individuals. It's hard to connect millions of human doctors and make sure they are all up to date with the latest medical discoveries. But you can connect 10 billion AI doctors into a single integrated network. If the World Health Organization identifies a new disease, you can update all of them in a split second. They can then share feedback with each other instantly, creating a learning system of unimaginable power. Think about self-driving cars. It's a mistake to compare one human driver to one self-driving car. We should compare a collection of human drivers to an integrated network of self-driving cars. Human drivers often miscommunicate at intersections, leading to collisions. But two self-driving cars approaching the same junction are not separate entities, they are part of a single algorithm. The chances of them miscommunicating are almost zero. If a traffic law changes, every single car can be updated instantly. Today, over 1 million people die in traffic accidents each year, and more than 90% of those are caused by human error: drunk driving, texting, falling asleep. Autonomous vehicles will never do any of these things. Harari argues that blocking automation in fields like transport and healthcare just to protect human jobs would be madness. We should protect humans, not jobs. So what new jobs will be created? Perhaps we'll see new roles in servicing and leveraging AI, drone maintenance, data analysis, cybersecurity. We might also see a rise in human AI teams, or centaurs, where a human and an AI work together to achieve results better than either could alone. After IBM's Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov at chess, humans didn't stop playing. Instead, human chess masters, trained by AIs, became better than ever. For a while, human AI teams were the best chess players in the world. But there's a problem with these new jobs. They will likely demand high levels of expertise. A 40-year-old unemployed cashier can't easily reinvent herself as a cancer researcher or a drone operator. This could lead to the rise of what Harari chillingly calls a new useless class, not useless in a moral sense, but economically redundant. We could face a terrifying situation of both high unemployment and a shortage of skilled labor. Many people might share the fate not of wagon drivers who became taxi drivers, but of the horses, who were pushed out of the job market altogether. It's much harder to struggle against irrelevance than against exploitation. In the 20th century, the masses revolted against being exploited by an economic elite. In the 21st century, Harari suggests, populist revolts might be staged against an economic elite that doesn't need them anymore. This leads us to the second pillar of the liberal story, equality. For the last few decades, we've been told that humanity is on a path to greater equality. But Harari warns that the 21st century might create the most unequal societies in history. The combination of AI and biotech could split humanity into different biological castes. Historically, the rich always imagined they were superior, but it was just a story. The average duke wasn't more talented than the average peasant, he just benefited from unjust discrimination. But by 2100, the rich might really be more talented, more creative, and more intelligent than the slum dwellers. How? Because for the first time in history, they will be able to translate their wealth into biological upgrades. While they used to buy status symbols like cars and yachts, soon they might be able to buy life itself. If new treatments for extending life and for upgrading physical and cognitive abilities are expensive, humankind might split. The super-rich could become a class of superhumans, while a massive underclass of useless Homo sapiens is left behind. Once this happens, the state might lose its incentive to invest in the health, education, and welfare of the masses. In the 20th century, governments invested in everyone because they needed millions of healthy laborers for the factories and millions of loyal soldiers for the trenches. But if the masses become economically and militarily irrelevant, what will happen to them? Their future will depend on the goodwill of a small elite. And in a time of crisis, like an ecological catastrophe, it would be very tempting to simply toss the superfluous people overboard. To prevent this concentration of all wealth and power, Harari argues that the key is to regulate the ownership of data. In ancient times, land was the most important asset. Politics was a struggle to control land. In the modern era, machines and factories became more important. Now, in the 21st century, data will eclipse both land and machinery as the most important asset. Politics will be a struggle to control the flow of data. If data becomes concentrated in too few hands, humankind will split into different species. The race to own the data is already on, headed by giants like Google, Facebook, and their Chinese counterparts, Baidu and Tencent. Right now, they capture our attention with free services and then resell our attention to advertisers. But Harari says their true business isn't advertising. By capturing our attention, they accumulate immense amounts of data about us, which is worth more than any advertising revenue. We aren't their customers, we are their product. This data hoard will allow them to create a new business model. Once algorithms can make choices for us, the advertising industry will become obsolete. Imagine asking Google, based on everything you know about me, my needs, my habits, my political views, what is the best car for me? If we learn to trust Google's wisdom more than our own easily manipulated feelings, what use are car advertisements? The bigger prize, however, is that with enough data and computing power, these giants could hack the deepest secrets of life itself. They could re-engineer organic life and even create inorganic life forms. This brings us to the most treasured value of all, liberty. The liberal story tells us that all authority comes from the free will of individual humans, their feelings, desires, and choices. The voter knows best. The customer is always right. The ultimate advice is to listen to yourself and follow your heart. Elections and referendums are not about what we think, they are about what we feel. But the scientific revolution is challenging this belief. Biologists are deciphering the mysteries of the brain and human feelings. It turns out our feelings are not some unique spiritual quality. They are biochemical mechanisms that all mammals use to calculate probabilities of survival and reproduction. Fear arises when millions of neurons in your brain calculate a high probability of death. Feelings of attraction arise when other biochemical algorithms calculate a high probability of successful mating. These feelings are not based on freedom, they are based on calculation. Until today, it still made practical sense to trust your feelings. No outside system, not even the KGB, had the biological knowledge and computing power to hack your inner world. But this is changing. As biotech merges with infotech, it will produce big data algorithms that can monitor and understand your feelings much better than you can. Authority will shift from humans to computers. Your illusion of free will is likely to disintegrate. This is already happening in medicine. Important medical decisions are increasingly based on the calculations of computers that understand our bodies better than we do. Soon, big data algorithms, fed by a constant stream of biometric data from sensors on or inside your body, could monitor your health 24/7. They could detect the very beginning of cancer or Alzheimer's, long before you feel anything is wrong. If you refuse to follow their recommendations, perhaps your medical insurance will become invalid, or your boss will fire you. This hacking of humans will extend to every area of life. An algorithm could tell a teenager exactly where they are on the gay-straight spectrum by tracking their eye movements and blood pressure as they look at pictures of men and women. Even if you try to hide from yourself, you won't be able to hide from Amazon or the secret police. They will know you, and this information will be worth billions. We are already entrusting algorithms with small decisions. We ask Google Maps to choose whether to turn right or left. We trust Netflix to recommend movies. But once we start to count on AI to decide what to study, where to work, and who to marry, human life will cease to be a drama of decision-making. Democratic elections and free markets will make little sense. Imagine Anna Karenina taking out her smartphone and asking the Facebook algorithm whether she should stay with her husband or elope with Count Vronsky. As algorithms come to know us so well, authoritarian governments could gain absolute control over their citizens. We could end up in a total surveillance regime that doesn't just watch what we do, but goes under our skin to observe our inner experiences. Imagine every citizen in a country like North Korea being required to wear a biometric bracelet. If you look at a picture of the dear leader and the sensors pick up the telltale signs of anger, you'll be in the gulag tomorrow morning. In the 20th century, democracies outperformed dictatorships because they were better at processing data. They diffused information and decision-making power among many people and institutions. A dictatorship that concentrated everything in one place was inefficient. But AI might swing the pendulum in the opposite direction. AI makes it possible to process enormous amounts of information centrally. The main handicap of authoritarian regimes might become their decisive advantage. We may come to live in what Harari calls digital dictatorships. So the liberal story is collapsing, and the twin revolutions in technology are threatening our core values of liberty and equality. Where can we turn for answers? Perhaps we should reverse the process of globalization and return to the old, familiar shelter of the nation-state? This is what's happening all over the globe. The vacuum left by liberalism is being filled by nostalgic fantasies about some local golden past. Donald Trump promised to make America great again, as if the America of the 1950s was a perfect society. The Brexiteers dreamed of making Britain an independent power, as if they were still in the days of Queen Victoria. In Russia, Putin's vision is to resurrect the old Tsarist empire. But nationalism, Harari argues, is not a solution. It's a form of escapism. Why? Because the biggest challenges we face are global in nature. Nationalism is simply the wrong framework to address them. There are three existential threats that no single nation can solve on its own: nuclear war, ecological collapse, and technological disruption. First, nuclear war. After 1945, the threat of total annihilation forced humanity to develop a global community, over and above our separate nations, to restrain the nuclear demon. This internationalist order gave us the most peaceful era in human history. Abandoning it and returning to nationalist power politics would be an irresponsible gamble. A zealous nationalist who cries "Our country first" should ask themselves if their country, by itself, can protect itself from nuclear destruction. Second, ecological collapse. Global warming is a present reality. To stop it, we need to dramatically cut greenhouse gas emissions. But no nation can stop global warming by itself. The Republic of Kiribati, an island nation in the Pacific, could reduce its emissions to zero and still be submerged under the rising waves if other countries don't follow suit. The problem is that global warming will affect different nations differently. Russia, for example, might actually benefit from it. As the ice melts in the Arctic, new sea lanes and natural resources could open up for Russia, and Siberia might become the world's breadbasket. This makes global cooperation incredibly difficult. Because there is no national answer to global warming, some nationalist politicians prefer to believe the problem doesn't exist. Third, technological disruption. As with climate change, no single country can restrict technologies like AI and bioengineering by itself. If the U.S. government forbids genetically engineering human embryos, that doesn't stop Chinese scientists from doing so. If that gives China a crucial military or economic advantage, the U.S. will be tempted to break its own ban. To avoid a race to the bottom, we will need globally accepted ethical guidelines. But nationalism suffers from a failure of imagination. It thinks in terms of territorial conflicts, while the technological revolution needs to be understood in cosmic terms. After 4 billion years of organic life evolving by natural selection, we are ushering in an era of inorganic life shaped by intelligent design. What does French or Russian nationalism have to say about that? So if nationalism is not the answer, what about religion? Can the ancient wisdom of the Bible, the Quran, or the Vedas guide us? Harari divides the problems we face into three types: technical, policy, and identity. For technical problems, like how farmers should deal with drought, religions are largely irrelevant. In the past, people prayed to priests for rain. Today, we call upon scientists to develop better pesticides and irrigation systems. The true expertise of priests has never been rainmaking. It has always been interpretation, explaining why the rain dance failed and why we must keep believing. For policy problems, like what economic measures governments should adopt to prevent global warming, religions also offer little help. Ancient scriptures are not good guides for modern economics. When Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran has to make a decision about interest rates, he can't find the answer in the Quran. He has to turn to the modern science of economics, to the ideas of Marx or Milton Friedman. He can then use his religious authority to wrap the scientific answer in the garb of a Quranic verse, but it's still a scientific answer. Where religion remains powerful is with identity problems. Religion gets to determine who is us and who is them. Religions use rites, rituals, and ceremonies to draw firm lines in the shifting sands of humanity. These traditions can fill life with beauty and encourage kindness. But they also unite certain people while distinguishing them from their neighbors. Unfortunately, Harari argues, This makes traditional religions part of the problem, not the solution. They are used mainly as the handmaid of modern nationalism. They encourage Iranians to see global warming from an Iranian perspective, and rabbis inspire Israelis to care mainly about what's good for Israel. They make it harder to find global solutions. This brings us to one of the most explosive issues of our time: immigration. The crisis in the European Union, built on a promise of universal values, shows the collision between global problems and local identities. The debate over immigration often degenerates into a shouting match. To clarify it, Harari views immigration as a deal with three terms. First, the host country allows immigrants in. But is this a duty or a favor? Pro-immigrationists see it as a moral duty. Anti-immigrationists see it as a privilege. Second, immigrants must embrace the core values of the host country. But how much should they assimilate? Should they abandon their traditional dress and food? Third, if immigrants assimilate, they eventually become equal members of society. But how much time needs to pass? 40 years is a short time for a nation, but an eternity for an individual. Underneath these debates lies a more fundamental question: are all cultures equal? After 1945, racism, the belief in biological superiority, became taboo. But Harari argues that the world is now full of culturists. Traditional racism was based on biology. Culturism is based on history and culture. When someone says that people from a certain country bring crime, they are not necessarily making a biological claim, they are making a cultural one. Unlike racism, which is unscientific prejudice, culturist arguments can sometimes be sound. Different cultures do have different norms. One fictional example Harari uses is a country of Chaldeans, who are taught to repress conflict, and a country of Warmlanders, who are taught to externalize it. If a Warmlander immigrates to Chaldea, their hot-tempered style might be seen as a problem, and they might be passed over for promotions. This isn't racism, it's a cultural clash. The immigration debate is not a clear-cut battle between good and evil. It is a discussion between two legitimate political positions. All this uncertainty, all this conflict, it can be terrifying. And that fear is often channeled into one specific threat: terrorism. Terrorists, Harari explains, are masters of mind control. They kill very few people but manage to terrify billions. In the European Union, about 50 people are killed by terrorists each year. Traffic accidents kill 80,000. Why do we fear terrorism more than sugar or cars? Because terrorism is a military strategy of the weak. It hopes to change the political situation by spreading fear, not by causing material damage. Terrorists are like a fly that tries to destroy a china shop. The fly is too weak to move a single teacup. So it finds a bull, gets inside its ear, and starts buzzing. The bull goes wild with fear and anger and destroys the china shop. This is what happened after 9/11. Islamic fundamentalists incited the American bull to destroy the Middle Eastern china shop. The modern state's legitimacy is based on its promise to keep the public sphere free of political violence. Even a single small attack is seen as a deadly threat. The state then feels compelled to respond with a massive show of security, which is exactly what the terrorists want. This overreaction is a far greater threat than the terrorists themselves. The success or failure of terrorism depends on us. If we allow our imagination to be captured and overreact to our fears, terrorism will succeed. If we react in a balanced and cool way, it will fail. The world feels overwhelming. The old stories are gone. The new challenges are global and complex. How can any of us possibly understand it all? The truth is, we can't. Harari says individual humans know embarrassingly little about the world. We suffer from what he calls the knowledge illusion. We think we know a lot, even though individually we know very little, because we treat knowledge in the minds of others as if it were our own. We think in groups. This isn't necessarily bad. It's what has made us masters of the world. But it has a downside. The world is becoming more complex, and people fail to realize just how ignorant they are. We lock ourselves in echo chambers of like-minded friends and news feeds where our beliefs are constantly reinforced. Bombarding people with facts is likely to backfire. Most people don't like too many facts, and they certainly don't like to feel stupid. Even leaders are trapped. Great power acts like a black hole that warps the space around it. The closer you get, the more twisted everything becomes. If you really want truth, you need to escape the black hole of power and allow yourself to waste time on the periphery. But leaders are always on the run. If we cannot understand the world, how can we tell the difference between right and wrong? Our sense of justice, Harari explains, evolved for life in small hunter-gatherer bands. It's overwhelmed when we try to comprehend relations between millions of people across continents. The greatest crimes in modern history resulted not just from hatred, but from ignorance and indifference. The world has become too complicated for our hunter-gatherer brains. So have we entered a post-truth era? Harari's surprising answer is that humans have always lived in an age of post-truth. Homo sapiens is a post-truth species, whose power depends on creating and believing fictions. For millennia, much of what passed for news were stories about miracles, angels, and demons. When 1,000 people believe a made-up story for 1 month, that's fake news. When 1 billion people believe it for 1,000 years, that's a religion. Fiction is one of the most effective tools in humanity's toolkit. It allows for large-scale cooperation. Adam and Eve never existed, but Chartres Cathedral is still beautiful. False stories have an intrinsic advantage over the truth when it comes to uniting people. If a big chief says the sun rises in the west, only true loyalists will clap. If you want power, at some point you will have to spread fictions. If you want to know the truth, at some point you will have to renounce power. This doesn't mean everything is fake news. Underneath the fictions, there is real suffering. And suffering is the most real thing in the world. If you want to know the difference between fiction and reality, start there. Ask whether the hero of a story can suffer. Can a nation suffer? Does it have eyes, hands, feelings? If you prick it, can it bleed? Obviously not. It is just a metaphor. When you hear politicians talk about the sacrifices of the eternal nation, try to translate it into real terms: a soldier crying in agony, a woman brutalized, a child shaking in fear. So what should we do? How do we prepare ourselves for this world of unprecedented transformations? Harari says that much of what kids learn today will be irrelevant by 2050. Schools should switch from cramming information to teaching the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Most important of all will be the ability to deal with change, to learn new things, and to preserve your mental balance. To stay relevant, you will need to reinvent yourself again and again. So what can you rely on? Not the adults, most of them don't understand the world. Not technology. If you don't know what you want in life, it will be all too easy for technology to shape your aims for you. Can you rely on yourself? Even Disney is realizing that's not so simple. The voice we hear inside our heads is often a reflection of propaganda and brainwashing. As technology gets better at hacking humans, it will become more dangerous than ever to just follow your heart. To succeed, you need to work very hard on getting to know your own operating system. This is the oldest advice in the book, Know Thyself. But it has never been more urgent. You are in a race with the algorithms of Amazon and the government. You have to get to know yourself before they do. What is the meaning of life? Harari says that when people ask this, they expect to be told a story. We are a storytelling animal. We want a story that explains reality and our role in it. It could be the story of the great circle of life, like in The Lion King. It could be a religious story about God's plan. It could be a nationalist story about the glorious destiny of your nation. But all these stories are fictions. The universe just doesn't work like a story. The first thing you need to know about yourself is that you are not a story. So who are you? This is where Harari shares his own personal journey. As a restless teenager, he found no answers in the stories around him. In university, he learned how to deconstruct myths but found no real insight. Finally, a friend convinced him to try a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. The instruction was simple: sit with your eyes closed and just observe the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. Don't do anything. Just observe the reality of the present moment. He says it was the most important thing anyone ever told him. He quickly realized he had almost no control over his mind. He couldn't focus on his breath for more than 10 seconds. He was not the CEO of his life, he was barely the gatekeeper. As the course went on, he learned to observe the sensations throughout his body: heat, pressure, pain. He learned that he never reacts to events in the outside world, he always reacts to the sensations in his own body. When the sensation is pleasant, he craves more. When it's unpleasant, he reacts with aversion. The deepest source of his suffering was in the patterns of his own mind. This, for Harari, is the path out. The big question isn't what is the meaning of life, but how do we get out of suffering? When you give up the fictional stories, you can observe reality with greater clarity. The Buddha taught that the three basic realities of the universe are that everything is constantly changing, nothing has any enduring essence, and nothing is completely satisfying. Suffering arises because we fail to appreciate this. We get attached to stories and identities, and when they prove to be empty, we suffer. The advice of the Buddha is, do nothing. The whole problem is that we are constantly busy creating stories. To really do nothing means that the mind, too, does nothing. It just observes. So what does Harari do? He meditates for 2 hours every day. He says it's not an escape from reality, it's getting in touch with it. For 2 hours a day, he observes reality as it is. For the other 22 hours, he gets overwhelmed by emails and tweets. He says that without the focus and clarity from this practice, he could not have written his books. In the end, this is the final, profound lesson. We are living in an age of bewilderment. The old stories have collapsed. No new story has emerged to replace them. We need to understand our own minds before the algorithms make our minds up for us. To do that, we don't need to believe in a new story. We just need to observe ourselves, right here, right now. To just observe. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, it's easy to feel a little dizzy. The book covers a vast and often unsettling landscape, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the crisis of liberal democracy, from the fiction of nations to the nature of consciousness itself. It can leave you feeling like the ground beneath your feet is shifting. And in a way, that's the whole point. Harari isn't trying to give us a new, comforting story to believe in. He's doing the opposite. He's trying to shake us awake from the stories we've been living inside our whole lives, often without even realizing it. His central message is not one of despair, but one of urgent clarity. He believes that if we can see the world as it truly is, free from the myths and fictions that cloud our judgment, we have a chance to navigate the incredible challenges ahead. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the idea that our biggest enemy isn't some external force, not a rogue AI, a foreign country, or a political opponent. Our biggest enemy is our own ignorance. We don't know ourselves. We don't understand how our minds work. And because of this, we are incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. In a world where corporations and governments are developing the technology to hack human beings, the simple, ancient advice to know thyself becomes a radical act of rebellion. It becomes a survival skill. Harari's own practice of meditation isn't presented as a religious dogma, but as a practical tool for empirical self-observation. It's a way to study the one thing we can observe directly: our own mind. It's about understanding the source of our own suffering and cravings, not because a book told us to, but because we can see it happening, moment by moment. So, what can you do with all this? It's a lot to take in. But here are a few simple, practical things you can start with today, inspired by the book's spirit. First, practice questioning one of your own stories. Pick one strong belief you hold, about your nation, your religion, your identity, or even your favorite sports team. Ask yourself, where did this story come from? What fictions does it rely on? What suffering might it be causing, for myself or for others? The goal isn't to destroy your beliefs, but to understand them more deeply and hold them more lightly. Second, pay attention to the algorithms in your life. The next time you scroll through your social media feed or get a recommendation on YouTube or Netflix, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, why am I seeing this? What is this algorithm trying to make me feel or do? This simple act of awareness is the first step in reclaiming some control from the forces that are trying to shape you. And finally, take a moment, just 1 minute, to observe your own mind. You don't need to sit on a cushion or chant a mantra. Just close your eyes and pay attention to your breath. Notice when your mind wanders. Notice the sensations in your body. Don't try to change anything. Just observe. In that simple act, you are beginning the most important exploration of all, the exploration of your own reality. That was a summary of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. We've touched on some of the biggest ideas today, but honestly, a summary is like looking at a map of a vast and beautiful country. The real adventure begins when you decide to explore it for yourself. This book is not just a collection of lessons. It's an invitation to think. It's an exercise for your mind. If any of the questions we've discussed today have sparked your curiosity or challenged your perspective, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it is an experience that might just change the way you see everything. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if this summary has brought you some value and clarity, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue this journey of learning and growing together.